Folks, today I thought we'd talk a little bit about running economy. Now, everybody gets pretty enamored with what their VO2 max is, and sometimes your pace at lactate threshold, and both of those are very important measures. But the real important factor in your running is your running economy, which is a little bit more difficult thing to measure. So let me give you a quick example of what running economy is. So I'm using my car. I'm the 14 gallons. I apologize if you're out of the US. This is going to be in gallons and things like that, but I think you'll get the idea. My wife's car got only a 12-gallon tank. So think of the size of our gas tank as our VO2 max. VO2 is how much oxygen you can take in typically in a minute. This is how much gas I can fit in the tank. Well, I only got about 30 miles per gallon, which meant even though I had a larger gas tank, a higher VO2 max, I could only go about 420 miles before I'm going to be out of gas. My wife's car, though, was very efficient. She got 45 miles per gallon. She could go 540 miles. So even though she had a lower VO2 max, she was much more efficient and had a little bit greater range. So that's essentially what your running economy is how well can you use that oxygen. So it's great to have a really high VO2 max, but if you can't use that effectively, it's really not going to help you very much. So what can you do to improve running economy? There's a lot of things. I'm only going to talk about a couple of them today. So first of all, I will tell you, stop overstriding. It's been estimated that roughly 80% of all recreational runners probably overstride, and overstriding is really going to affect your economy. So think when you overstride, what happens is your foot is actually braking you with every single stride. So think of the gas mileage you would get in your car if you kept tapping on the brake all the time, and that's just not a good way to do it. So I'm going to show you a picture of me. Don't look at the crappy parts of this because there's a lot of crappy parts of this picture too, but this was me towards the end of a 5K a while back. You can see I've got the arrow at a couple of places, one at my waist, because for whatever reason, my waist is back. My hips shouldn't be back. My hips should be forward. So I want to imagine my hips were actually forward. You can see my foot is not quite off the ground. So initially that might look like I'm overstrutting, but the reality is if my hips were a little bit forward, by the time my foot actually hits the ground, my foot will be landing underneath my knee because my knee will continue forward, the body will continue forward, and that foot would be kind of underneath my center of mass if my hips were forward. And that's what you want, is your foot should be landing on a soft knee kind of underneath your center of mass. What happens with most recreational runners is their foot lands way out in front of the knee, and that's what kind of creates that braking motion, which will slow you down imperceptibly every single step, and it is terrible for your gas mileage or your running economy. So what do you do if you're overstriding? Again, there's all kinds of things you have to figure out why. I would tell you in most cases you have tight hip flexors. I think most runners have tight hip flexors, and tight hip flexors are going to cause you to kind of overstride, because what happens is you want to kind of lead with the knee, but because your hip flexors are tight, you can't lead with your knee. You end up leading with your foot, and that's what kind of throws your foot out way out in front. If you go to YouTube, you can find all kinds of little tests to test what your hip flexors are like. Look for some good stretches on your hip flexors. You got to stretch them. Chances are you have tight hip flexors. If not, the bottom line is if you're overstriding, and most recreational runners do, finding a way to correct that is going to really improve your economy. Second, and the last tip for this, is to be light and quick on your feet. Running should be very light and quick on your feet. So how do you do that? How do you get to a light and quick? Well, run faster. Okay, but you run faster for very short periods of time, and the two best ways to run faster and help improve that light and quick on your feet are hill sprints, which should generally be 10 to 15 seconds in duration, and strides, which are 20 to 30 seconds in durations. In hill sprints, they're exactly like it said. You are running as fast as you can up that hill for 10 to 15 seconds. Strides, 20 to 30 seconds, tend to be more like about your mile pace. So they're still very fast running, but there's a couple of rules behind hill sprints and the strides if you want to promote being light and quick on your feet. First, you have to run smooth, strong, and controlled. If you're feeling like you're flailing and it just feels uncomfortable, then you need to slow that down. I don't care if it's not a sprint. I don't care if it's not your mile pace. Smooth, strong, controlled is what you're after, so you can get that quick rhythm and really going on those strides or going on it. And the other thing is full recovery. People tend to think of hill sprints and strides as running that real hard, resting for a few seconds and pounding at it again and pounding at it again. And that's not what you're looking for. You're looking for full recovery, because the goal is to run every one of those really, really well from that smooth, strong, controlled standpoint. It's not about beating yourself into the ground where you can't run anymore. So remember, think smooth, strong, controlled. Make sure you're giving yourself full recovery, because running them really, really well is critical. Now I'm going to touch on cadence a little bit because that always comes up with the light and quick. You've probably heard, cadence does matter, and you've probably heard the 180. I'm not saying you shouldn't be 180, but I'm telling you 180 is not a magic number. It might be 170 for you. It might be 185 for you. Everybody's cadence varies a little bit. Chances are if you're much under 165 or so, and I'm talking about when you're doing some of your faster running, that you might not be light and quick on your feet. There's still a lot of variables in that. But what Jack Daniels had said once is that when they were at the Olympics watching elite runners in races, that almost everybody was 180 steps, that's both feet, per minute. Well, okay, so first of all, that meant there were some that weren't at 180, and this was at their race pace. So I can tell you when I'm in a 5K, I'm about 195. But if I'm doing a long, slow, easy run, I'm more like 174. So it's going to vary a little bit. Don't get enamored with the 180. And really, cadence isn't the important thing. It's about being light and quick on your feet. So running economy is kind of where it's at, not as much VO2 max and everything else. Remember, correct your stride. Make sure you've got the correct stride. Be light and quick on your feet are two big things that you can probably do to help improve your running economy.